So the president-elect had an opportunity today to reach out and to heal the entire nation. But instead, the 74 million people who voted for President Trump, this is what they heard.
They weren't protesters. Don't dare call them protesters. They were a riotous mob, insurrectionists, domestic terrorists.
We are going to hear from people tonight on all of this. Senator Marco Rubio is here. But first up tonight, Peter Navarro, who served the president since the 2016 election and as trade advisor in the White House. Peter, good evening to you. And as I said, we're going to break as soon as we get this message from the president. We're going to go to that. But can you tell us anything about what that message is going to be tonight? Do you know?
No, I'm here in my personal capacity, Martha. And the message I have is it's always listen to the signal and ignore the noise. And yesterday was an historic day, and several things can be true at the same time. We saw the Congress certify the election. I think it's also true there's a high probability the election was stolen. Number three, I think Congress missed an historic opportunity to do its constitutional duty to hear some of the grievances across the 6 battleground states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. We know based on thousands of pages of documents that there's significant election irregularities there. And the last thing that can be true is that violence has no place in American political discourse. We've had too much of that over the last 6 to 8 months.
Let me break that down for a moment, because you say that the election might be stolen. But when I read what you wrote and I listen to the interviews that you did on it, what I'm hearing is something slightly different than that. What I'm hearing is that a lot of what happened prior to the election in legislation that was passed and in lawsuits that were lost, there were, I think, 50-some lawsuits that were led by Mark Elias across the country, that the rules changed in this game in a way that left Republicans in a bad position. And maybe they should have done a better job at making sure that those rules couldn't be passed. But the rules in most cases were legally changed. And I heard you say this as well in an interview that you did earlier. So then you have this idea of, we won in a landslide and it was stolen. And then you get all of these people on the mall. And I want to say that, we need to talk about protesters and violent disruptors in different ways. And I want to make the point tonight that most of these people out there are good people who had very strong convictions about the country and the things that I just mentioned moments ago. The people who broke in and disrupted and vandalized the United States Capitol are being sought by the FBI, as they should be this evening. And both sides, I think, feel strongly about that. But is there a problem with talking about it being stolen and saying that it was won in a landslide? And did that lead to some of this emotion that we've seen, rather than being, straight with people and saying this is not going to change on January 6th? What do you say to that, Peter?
Let me unpack that. First of all, we had a historic opportunity yesterday under the rules of the Constitution to take 2 hours per state in both chambers, Senate and House, to air some of the grievances. And if you go from Arizona to Georgia across the battlegrounds, there's some serious problems there that raise significant issues of illegal ballots. It is true, Martha, that much of what the Democrats did was legal in terms of changing laws, rules, guidance, but they did it in a way which was designed to commit an illegal act, which was to basically stuff the ballot box with absentee and mail-in ballots, which, as Jimmy Carter and James Baker once said, are the fastest way to fraud an election. They stuffed the ballot box with those. At the same time, they did the political equivalent of defunding the police.
Right,
they got rid of the election cops.
We've been through this, and we have, we've put your report up on the screens, and we've showed people. But I want to talk about this emotion that's out here tonight, because, and we're waiting to hear from the president moments from now. But the fact is that Vice President Pence, went out there and said, look, this is not what we're going to do. He felt it was unconstitutional to take that action yesterday. You're part of the White House staff. Were you there today? Were you at the White House today?
No, I'm working on my personal capacity, trying to parse this particular issue. And I did write 2 reports. They're very well documented. I spent looked through thousands of pages of testimony documents. And it is my professional analysis based on what I've seen on the chessboard that there's a high likelihood that this was a stolen election. And I think a lot of the American people believe that. If you look simply, Martha, at the margins across the states.
But I think, Peter, that I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate the fact that you've looked into it, and we've covered it very extensively here as well, and some of it based on your research. But I think that that the problem is that we have this this reaction, and people who have been led to believe that something was going to change when it wasn't. And I think there's a lot of anger out there, frankly, and I think some of it is directed from people who have been very staunch supporters of the president who feel like they were misled. Can you speak to that?
Misled by who? I mean,
misled by the idea that anything was going to change, that it was actually going to flip the election. There were people who were saying yesterday, that they believed that was going to happen yesterday, but that wasn't going to happen yesterday. And I think there's that needs to be said.
It could have happened yesterday. I thought Matt Gaetz of everybody yesterday was magnificent. And speaking about what could have happened in that chamber.
Well, the one person who had the ability to do that was Vice President Pence, and he looked at it very closely and believed that it could not, and made a stand in that regard, for which he has been given credit in some quarters. And I know the president was very unhappy, and I assume you were too. But Peter, thank you. You want to make a final comment?
Well, it's not a question of emotion, Martha. It's simply that if we don't have a belief in free and fair elections in this country, it's going to be very difficult for us to move forward as a vibrant democracy.
I hear you on that.
And that's what we're grappling with. So let's move forward.
We've talked to Rand Paul about the things that need to change at the state legislature level, but we also want to be very straight and honest with people. And I understand the president has said today that the transition will happen, and it will happen peacefully, which I think is a very positive move.
Of course.
But I got to leave it there.
It was always going to.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Peter Navarro.